Okay, as requested, a few people have asked how I managed to get such a high chrome-like finish on the aluminium, so I'm just going to go through the method that I actually used to actually get that. I've started out with the raw piece here. This is actually the battery cover. I'm just dremeling away the little pieces that have been left behind from the sand casting. Once I've done that, I file back the rough edges, trying to get those tight corners in there as nicely as possible. Once I've done that, I'll actually flatten over the surface altogether, again just removing any of the larger pits or razors that have been left behind by the sand. Once I've done that, I'll go around the outside edge. I'm just trying to get a consistent sort of surface, and you're sort of dealing in the scratches basically being left behind by the file, and you get that fairly even. Once that's done, you go for a slightly lighter or finer scratch, and you go progressively finer and finer and finer until it's ready to polish. Once I've done the filing, I hit it on the sander. Again, I'm just going over those same sort of areas, and you'll find that you have to go backwards and forwards several times. There's also a finer file that I use in those tight corners, and you'll see that I actually use a broken hacksaw blade to get into some of the tight corners there as well. Just switching back over to the Dremel using the sander attachment that actually comes with it. Again, just getting into those corner sections. Once I've got that done fairly roughly, I'll hit it with the sandpaper by hand. The idea here is that I'm blending in where the Dremel and the larger sander has done. And again, even through the polishing process, you may actually have to go backwards and forwards. Sometimes even a completely polished piece, you'll actually have to go back and do it. This is the finer file that I was talking about. It helps me get in to those corners. These are the sort of bits that can be quite tedious, because sometimes the sand doesn't do a very tight corner like that, so you've got to get in there and do it all by hand. That's the broken hacksaw blade. It's quite literally just a brand new hacksaw blade that I've broken in half. I use it on the drag cut, so the teeth are facing backwards. I find it a lot easier to actually do that, to get those nice sharp corners in there. The blade also works quite well for fine line detail as well. This is just getting close to being ready for polishing now. I've gone over to a wet and dry paper. I'm using a coarse one, and then I'll use a fine one. And really all I'm doing is to actually see whether or not it's got a clean enough surface ready for polishing. That looks like it's going to buff up alright, so it's off to the polisher. Now what I'm using here is it's a 1 horsepower grinder that's been just converted so that it actually has the cones that actually grip the polishing wheels. I'm using a cutting compound on the first one with a hard sisal mop or polishing wheel. This is actually quite, it's made out of almost like rope sort of texture. Again, you can see me sanding in the corner there. You'll have to do that sometimes, as I said, even on a finished piece. You may find that with all the polishing you do, you still have to go back over those sections. That's where the little Dremels are really great for doing that sort of stuff, because you've obviously got the mini mops that you can use on the Dremel machines as well for those really fine corner details. The bucket of water there is quite literally because it gets quite hot. The friction that actually comes off the wheel heats up quite nicely. And to those people who are going to criticise, I deliberately don't wear gloves. I find it safer to actually not use it. The wheels, as you can see, interchange. As soon as I turn it on, it grips on. And it's not particularly harsh on the hands, but I find if you're trying to wear gloves, the glove can actually wrap around, and it's more dangerous than not wearing it. This is actually a final cut wheel that I'm using here that's almost worn down to the hub. I'm still using the cutting compound on it. That's the green soap looking stuff that you see there. It just again helps me get into those tighter corners. On this particular piece I'm using 3 different stages, but only 2 different soaps. The idea is that you start out with the harder wheels and then go over to the second wheel. The second wheel is much softer, it's more like fabric. You can see it sort of flexing there under the job. You'll notice also there that I'm using a white compound, which is sometimes again called soap. They're a waxy type compound that has different cutting grades impregnated in them, that adheres to the wheel as it's spinning around and does the cutting process and polishes it up. This particular one is actually called superchrome, or superchrome white, which is what gives us that nice fine polish. Now again, I've just gone down to a smaller, harder wheel to get a bit more of that fine detail in. Now both soaps actually cut and polish, but the green soap is a coarser cut and the white soap is that fine grade one. It's getting close to actually being on the final polish here now. Once I'm ready for the final polish, I'll swap over to, it's the same size as that wheel I was using a second ago, but it's a much softer one again. And because these are made out of like a cotton fabric, they flex very nicely around the job and get into those nooks and crannies quite nicely. Once it's finished, it's just under hot tap with a bit of soap. The hot water just simply melts away the waxy compound that's left behind from the polishing process. Bit of an old toothbrush, give it a scrub out. It's getting very close to being a finished piece there now. Once it's cleaned up, that's the job done for that one. There'll be a little bit of extra detail that has to be cut back in there. There's a couple of holes in the center there that have to be re-drilled, and those lines might be drawn out a bit better, and again I might hit in the corners there with the Dremel. But apart from that, that's the job done, and that's the process in doing it. I hope this has been some helpful information for you. Thanks guys, bye.